welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to discuss the law of optimality in manifestation, and this is a topic which I came up with, which is fairly original, but of course the concepts are something which already exists out there in different disciplines, and so the law of optimality is something. Which I've studied for over the years, even before I came across this topic of manifestation, Neville Goddard's teachings. So, in a sense, the law of optimality is extremely universal, which bridges different disciplines, spirituality, science, commerce, and I mean, if you explain this to a person who's not aware of manifestation, law of attraction, it would make perfect sense to him, as long as the examples aren't related to manifestation. But yeah, so this is something which would make extreme sense, but this would also explain why letting go is important and why letting go isn't contradictory to manifestation, to your desire, because this is a very common discussion that letting go is kind of the opposite of desire. So if you ask for something and then you just let it go, it means that it won't come, or you are so kind of canceling all the your effort. So I'll try to clarify this concept at the end of this slide, and so let's begin. So the first one is the concept of polarity, right? So polarity is something which exists everywhere, right? And every property in your surroundings lies between two extremes of two extremes two extreme concepts, right? So for example, say light, right? How well lit your room is. If you want to assign a value to it, so you would assign it somewhere between the two extremes of absolute light and absolute darkness. So what I'm trying to say is that these two properties of absolute darkness and absolute light are idealistic, archetypical, and conceptual. So they don't exist out there. So we can't really see these extremes of polarity in our everyday life. Every single property which we come across lie between these two extremes. So for example, say for example, you're talking right now, I'm holding this mic, and when I bought this mic, so I research on how loud it can get. So that is a common property that needs to be gauged before I buy a mic. And so there it's measured in decibels, right? So whatever value in decibel this microphone is, it lies between the two extremes. So say it's 6 decibel is the maximum loudness. This is completely arbitrary, but so it is somewhere between the two extremes of what you'd consider absolute loudness and absolute silence. So in a sense, that the most silent this mic can get, there'll be some noise. Like for example, right now I'm flooring the sound, and it is capturing some noise of my ceiling fan and everything. So it's not completely silent. And on the other end, in terms of loudness, there's a maximum ceiling, and that maximum ceiling is not what I'd define archetypical loudness as. Now this example is slightly it's kind of weird, I get it, but this is something which I can think of at this very moment. So now coming to the second point, there's some light in the dark room. So what I'm trying to say is that suppose you are sitting in a completely dark room where there's absolutely you can't see anything. There's some light entering the room which is absolutely negligible, but it is still there. It's not pitch black, right? So your dark room, the darkness is towards the side of archetypical darkness, and it's and if you want to round it off, you can call it absolute dark, but it's not archetypical darkness. It's not absolute 100% darkness. it can be 99% dark, it can get 99.9% dark if you're really careful, if you're really blocking everything out. But it's not archetypical darkness. So that's what and on the opposite end, we have there's some darkness in a very well lit room. Now suppose you just install a lot of light in your room, there will be still some shadow from objects, different objects. So there's some darkness in a well lit room. So is that well lit room isn't representative of archetypical light. So everything, so the point of this the concept of polarity is that everything lies between the two extremes, and nothing in our real life is archetypical, right? So our next slide, the sweet spot. So it's everything we ask for in our lives, and everything we want to get, and if we want to maximize our results, we would need to aim for the sweet spot of everything, right? So say for example that in this concept of light and darkness, which I've discussed in the previous slide, is that you want an optimum amount of light in your room, right? You don't want too much of it, because that'll blind you. So when you're asking for more light, you're asking it only relative to your current situation, right? So if you enter a room, you're trying to read a book or something, and you ask for light, you're trying to dial it up relative to where you are. It's not like you're asking for absolute light, because there can be too much light, and if you are I don't know, if you stare at the sun, you know exactly what I'm trying to say, that it can blind you, and it is blinding. It's too overwhelming for your eyes, and that is something that needs to be that's need to be clarified. Now this situation where there's too much light, it is rarer. So if coming to the second point, it is common for us to ask for light in the dark, right? Because we are always trying to I mean, it is common for us to battle the dark. But if you really crank up the light, if you really dial it up, now you would want some darkness in that. So at any given point in time, you are actually asking for the optimum amount of light. You're not really asking for more. So it's not like if I give you a lot of light, it's going to help you, like I said. So sometimes when there's too much, you get results when you dial things down a notch. And this is the part which is about letting go, right? So letting go is only relative to extreme desire. It's like you've been practicing for a while, you are just overwhelmed, you're just constantly repeating affirmations, and you are a bit exhausted. But you've heard somewhere in motivational videos that the harder you work, the faster you'll get results. So you just keep pushing it. Now that's something which needs to be addressed, and I'll discuss it later. But this is what I mean by sweet spot and dialing down things a notch, right? So coming to the next slide, why less is more. Now you might have heard of this saying in traditional videos, in normal motivational videos, self-help channels. So there's a sweet spot in everything, like I said, in discussing the previous slide. So this archetype, that this darkness and the dark and light, good and evil, these archetypes are are taught to little children. So like when little children when they first read books, they aren't accustomed to the nuances of everything. So we trivialize these ideas and simplify them as something extremely binary, right? So kids perceive the world as black and white. So everything to them is either good or bad. It's either evil or good. So even if you look at the children's literature, comics, I mean, I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about absolute like I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years of age, uh, like small children. So their fiction has these characters which are archetypical heroes and villains, right? So evil princess versus the brave knight. If you really read these, if you really do character analysis, there's they aren't too complicated. The evil princess has everything going, like she's the archetype of destruction, like she does everything bad, and hopefully not violent, because we don't teach, we try to avoid those things in children's comics. But evil princess has nothing positive going on in her life. She's absolute, like, every single domain, every single variable you can think of, everything is negative associated with the evil princess. Whereas for the brave knight, everything he does is absolutely great. Like, he's strong, he's weak, he's handsome, everything. Right. So that is how we portray our characters when we try to teach these concepts to little children. But when we grow up, nuanced and complicated things interest us, because we know that even in drama, if you look at the characters in drama, like for example Game of Thrones, you'll see that every character, you can round them off to good or bad, right? But even they have something the most evil characters have something good going on, and even the best characters have something negative. So if I can think of two characters, and since I mentioned Game of Thrones, right? So say for positive, the positive character is this Ned Stark, right? Eddard Stark. So Eddard Stark, if you analyze his character, he's a largely a good person, right? So he's a family man. He does most of his stuff. But if you look at the first episode, if you remember, and if you are a fan, then he beheads this guy, right? And so it kind of creates this sensation in you, like this contrast, right? So he's a good character, but he just chops someone's head off. So that he's someone who's largely good, but with hints of negativity in him, like negative aspects. I don't right? And when we talk about a largely negative character, we have Cersei Lannister, and we know what Cersei Lannister does. Like, she's always plotting stuff, but you also know that she loves her children. So, like, that positive part of her kind of dial things down and makes her a bit more relatable, right? So we as adults, we are interested in literature where characters are complicated, and because they're complicated, they are much more representative of people in real life, right? And in fiction, and since I'm a Marvel fan, anti-heroes such as the Punisher. Now, if you really look at the definition of anti-hero, anti-hero is a bit of a misnomer, because I always thought anti-heroes, when I first came across the word, they were villain. But anti-heroes is something, anti-heroes are pretty much heroes who aren't archetypical heroes. They have some negative traits of villain, and which make them all the more interesting, all the more appealing, right? So the characters like Punisher. So Punisher is portrayed as this lone wolf kind of a character, whose backstory is like his name is Frank Castle, and his family, he got involved with a mafia, and his family, his wife and children, he got killed off, and so he went as a revenge. He went on a killing spree. So he pretty much kills his enemies. So he has no mercy, like other characters in the same universe, right? So that is what makes the Punisher different from your traditional heroes such as Spider-Man, Iron Man, people who are merciful, who are kind of they think before they sort of pull the trigger, and yeah. So that is an anti-hero. So the Punisher is a largely a good character, right? So if you were to round, he's still an hero. So if you look at the focus on the word anti-hero, right? So this word anti-hero, so he's still a hero. So he's not a villain, because then we just use the word villain here. He's an anti-hero. So he has these two opposing traits going on, which makes him the Punisher, right? So in this context of letting go is pretty much like that. It is this anti part, right? Of It's like anti desire. I mean, just don't take it too seriously, but my point here is that you need these two opposing elements for things to work for you, and that is the sweet spot, like I said in the previous slide as well, right? And the second point is you want the optimum amount of light, like I said, like I discussed, that you crave for light in darkness, and then again you also crave for darkness when there's light. But this second scenario is rarer than the first one, so we don't discuss this second case. We don't really discuss letting go, right? Because you don't discuss letting go because we are I mean, it's an uphill battle for most of us to learn how to ask for it, right? So we spend a lot of time, and then we think, okay, so now since we've learned that and it's over, we don't need anything more. But that is not entirely correct, right? Now, in investment, in those of you who are in economics, you know this very quite well, that never invest more than what you're willing to lose. And so how does this apply to this manifestation, right? So what is your investment in this context? It is asking for it. So you are dedicating some time towards doing all these practices, affirmations, SATs, you name it. Like there's so much in this domain. But say you dedicate an absurd amount of time, say 1 hour every day. Now you are going to be very invested in the outcome, right? That I mean, there'll be a part of you like, I'm giving so much, I want something in return, right? And that is the attitude which creates resistance. So the idea is that you need to do less to get more results, less practices to get more results. So every person, depending on their personalities, their past experiences, and also the current stage at which they are in, they have this sweet spot, right? And this in terms of how much practices are ideal for them, right? So if you are someone who's naturally very detached and they can just sort of take things lightly, you can practice as much as you want. You can just like keep on affirming like a sorcerer. Whereas if you are someone who has an obsessive personality like myself, now I would like to be very careful. Like you'd want to be very careful as to how much time you are dedicating. And so, like just a few months ago, I found myself doing 10-minute meditation every hour, and then it wasn't like I was choosing to do it. It was a bit of an addiction for me, right? And so that was something which I finally was able to tackle. And right now I'm in this place where I'm not too obsessed with things, and I'm being in the present moment. And but it was a journey. It was like a 3-month journey, which is short, and it was 3 months only because I've been through this cycle previously. And trust me, that wasn't, I mean, that wasn't 3 months, it was a lot longer than that. But yeah, so the thing here is that if you want to if you don't want to invest any more than you want to lose, you want to do these practices just for fun. And I know this is a bit cliched and it's easier said than done, but if that time is 10 minutes for you, like if you can convince yourself that, okay, I'm gonna just close my eyes and just do it for 10 minutes, 10 minutes isn't a big deal, then do that. Like my guide, if you were to take as a rule of thumb, you want to cut your time in half. So if you want to do it for 30 minutes, if you instinctively want to do it for 30 minutes, just cut it in half and do it for 15 minutes. And so that 15 minutes, which it seems like nothing compared to your initial decision of doing it for 30 minutes, right? So that works quite well for me. So let's go to the next slide. twice the effort doesn't mean twice the outcome. Now, the law of diminishing returns. Now, this is also a concept of economics. So, if I were to simplify it, like each successive chunk of effort will bring less and less result than the previous chunk. Now, this is an extremely loose definition, but what I'm trying to say is that there's this concept of linearity, right? So when we first learn maths, there is this concept of linearity. So if I give double the effort, I'll get double the result. So I remember this problem, right, in math, in mathematics, and I think linearity works in some cases in real life. So twice the effort doesn't mean twice the outcome isn't applicable to everything. So just if I just wanted to clarify that, but it's applicable to most of the stuff, and definitely it is in this case of manifestation, which I'm going to discuss in a while. But so in when we were a kid, like we used to learn about this thing that if one employee could do something in 1 hour, then 2 employees could do the same thing in 30 minutes because they're twice as efficient, right? And so this is like inverse linear relation. So one employee does something in 1 hour, how much time would it take for 2 employees to achieve the same? So the answer is 30 minutes because they're twice as efficient, right? Whereas if you ask the opposite question, is that if one employee brings n amount of result, how much result will 2 employees bring? So they'll bring twice the result, so 2n. So this is linear direct relation. So the first example of how much time will take is inverse linear relation, and the second one is direct linear relation. So my point was the focus is on the word linear. So twice and half, so 1/2. I mean, I'm a bit math obsessed, so I'm just giving these examples. But this is a linear example, right? But for most things, like, it's not linear. It's either sublinear or supralinear. I'm not gonna go there, but yeah. So say for example, take this point number C. Example: working for 4 hours versus 8 hours. Now, if you focus on this variable productivity, right? In the first 4 hours, you will be much more productive than what you'll be in the last 4 hours. And if you work a 9 to 5 job, you'll realize that every single hour, the amount of productivity or the way you're feeling, they aren't symmetric, like they aren't exactly the same. There are hours when you feel like absolutely like you don't want to do anything, whereas in certain hours you want to be really productive and you want to you achieve a lot more. So this distribution is not equal, right? Now, so for example, what if I extend this example, so say you are building a YouTube channel like I am right now. So instinctively, I want to double my effort. Right now, I'm spending say 2 hours every day. I want to instantly do 4 hours, and a part of me who subscribes to this idea of linear effort versus result would think that if I double my effort, I'll get double the result. But that's not the case, right? It is actually it's actually about quality. So if I increase my effort, I'll do something like, say I'll dial it up a little bit, because again, if you look at the law of the less is more principle, I'm always trying to find the sweet spot. So for 4 hours, this is an arbitrary example, but say my sweet spot is 3 hours, right? And I am working for 2 hours. So I double it. 4 hours, I feel that the last hour I'm getting really exhausted and I want to do something. So I dial it down. And eventually I figure out that 3 hours is my sweet spot, right? And So this thing can be applied to gym as well. So this is something which I did not write in this slide, but I'm someone who's into fitness. I've been working out for quite a few years now. And so in terms of gym, when I first joined the gym, and I distinctly remember that um, I became obsessed with the gym. And I'll be honest with you, a part of the results which I achieved, uh, with some of my personal goals, are has like it, the obsession has something to do with it, and it helped me. But I would get burnt out, right? So initially I'd go 6 days a week, and I just run on the treadmill, do all sorts of crazy stuff, and and those were 3 hour sessions. So I mean, I always had difficulty leaving the gym once I entered. I mean, so so I always thought that, yeah, compared to the guy who's just hitting the gym for like say 4 days a week, I have this advantage over him, right? But you are not considering the variable of recovery. You need to maximize both. You need to maximize effort. You need to maximize recovery. So there's a sweet spot. Like for me, it was 3 to 4 days a week. Right now, I'm working out for 4 days a week, and these things change. Like for example, if you reduce the individual sessions, um, you can increase the number of sessions in per week. But there's always a sweet spot, because if you do too much, you might enjoy the first week, but the second week it'll spill over and you're gonna feel exhausted, and you're not gonna feel absolutely sharp, right? So there's a sweet spot for everything. So more isn't always better, right? So 3 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week is way better than say 6 days a week, as a general rule of thumb, in case you're wondering. But I'm not a fitness channel, so yeah. Yeah. And so my last example is that this is about relativity. Is that And so this is an extension of the law of diminishing returns, but it is also do with something to do with Einstein's theory of relativity. Now it's not there's nothing to do with science. It's just that I'm just focusing on the word relativity, that same thing can be perceived differently by different individuals, right? So there are two people, a decamillionaire uh, and a decimillionaire. So a decamillionaire perceives $1,000,000 differently than a decimillionaire. So let me define, because these terms must be clarified before. So a decamillionaire has $10 million, right? So he has $10 million, whereas a millionaire has 1/10 of $1,000,000. So deci means 1/10, deca means 10 times, right? So decimillionaire has 1/10 of $1,000,000 or $100,000, right? So say both of these people, they make a profit of $1,000,000 each. Now how will both of them perceive that $1,000,000? Now they will perceive it differently relative to what they have. Now mind it that the buying power of $1,000,000 is still the same. So I'm not talking, so there's certain objectivity about that $1,000,000, right? But when it comes to relative perception, right? So a decamillionaire, it's just an addition of 1/10 of his net worth. So he has $10 million, now it's just one. So that is 1/10 of his current net worth. So he's gonna be like, yeah, it's like something which is relatively ordinary, but it's still $1,000,000. So it's not a big deal, and it's certainly not a big deal if I compare that to how a decimillionaire would feel, right? So say you have $100,000 in your bank account and you just made $1,000,000. So that is 10 times the increase. So imagine how you'd feel. You'll always be over the moon, right? Of course, because that is 10 times. So this is the idea of relativity, that $1,000,000, which is the constant object in this discussion, the guy who has 10 times that amount will just look at it as something ordinary, whereas a decimillionaire will look at it as something extremely it's a big deal for him, right? So the point here is that this is something which can I can extend this discussion to the law of attraction theory of assuming it is done, and embodying the person who already has it, right? So if $1 million is your the object of your desire, and take it and like just take it as a metaphor, if your desire is something else. But this thing of being if you're someone who's you're supposed to embody the decamillionaire, right? The guy who has 10 times the amount. So it's like, I know it's an uphill battle, it's something, it needs to be clarified further, and there are different processes out there. But this is uh, what you're trying to be. You're trying to be the decamillionaire. So if you embody the spirit of a decamillionaire, then manifesting $1 million or its equivalent is easy. So whereas a decimillionaire is like someone is, I mean, it's still big deal. I mean, it's not change, it's not chump change, definitely. But yeah, so this, I deliberately took these numbers because both are in factors of 10, and it's very easy to understand, right? So let's go to the next slide. um yeah, the typical journey, right? First, you learn to dial up. So initially what happens is that when you first come across the law of attraction, or even just normal, say gym for the example, you always chase more effort. I mean, you chase more results, and you believe that doing more will make you more money, give you more results. So when you first start anything, you dial it up, like you just indefinitely dial it up till you get burned down. So if you look at traditional motivational videos, speakers like Tony Robbins, there's lots of others. um, so they always they embody this go-getter mindset, and which is not wrong, except we don't discuss the nuanced, we don't have. And I understand, because actually the thing here is that these videos cater to different kind of people. It's not, I mean, you can't take one video and one advice and then just apply it to everyone else, because these are meant for people who don't want to take action, or on, like someone who's lazy or something like that. I mean, you get it, you need to go somewhere. Like I'm not talking about so that discussion whether you need to take action, that's a different story. I'm talking about traditional 3D concept. So for example, you want to get a good physique, you go to the gym, right? So you take some action. But what I'm trying to say is that there's an optimum amount. So the hustle culture, all about working and burning yourself down. So you dial it up. That's the first part of your journey. This happens to everybody, uh, because the quantity is not discussed, right? You get burned down, if you feel hopeless, everything, and then you'll dial it down. So for example, lots of time people give up, right? I mean, there are two distinct kinds of people who give up. Someone who stops, absolutely just quits, goes and doesn't do anything. And there's another who kind of convinces himself that, let me just do it, I don't care about the results. So that is that is optimizing. That is the balance that I'm talking about in point 3, right? So I'm doing something, I'm just doing, but I'm not focused on the outcome. So effort, but the expectation, right? And not the positive kind of expectation. I mean the desperation, the this thing, that the need, right? So you find the balance. So you see, what I'm trying to say is that when you dial up, when you really dial it up, you become desperate, right? If you really dial down, so it's like this dialing up and dialing down. I'm talking about the first scenario where I said about this guy who absolutely quits. You dial up, and then there's this opposite stuff that goes on, you dial it down, so you absolutely crash. Whereas the second guy who finds the balance, he finds the balance. So he goes up, he realizes that it's too much, he dials down, he comes down, and then he settles somewhere in the middle. And that's the sweet spot. And you apply the rule to everything. And the magic about this thing is that, say I always like to give this example of gym, because quite honestly, this is something which I've struggled a lot with ever since I was a child, and when I finally got the results, it was. I'm gonna have I'll make a separate video and discuss this whole gym journey, but it's not really a law of attraction or spirituality topic. But yeah, so the thing here is that um, when I learned about this thing, this manifestation, and about how to manifest and everything, I understood the idea of letting go. I wasn't really, I mean, I wasn't. Like I said, I have a very obsessive personality, so I got lost in thought. But I got the idea because in the entire gym thing, I burned myself down initially, and then I dialed it down to those 3 to 4 days a week, and I got maximum results. So I always knew that that is what I should aim towards, at the very least, even if I'm not managing things right now. So that's the typical journey, right? So is the law of optimality greater than the law of assumption? So greater, by greater I mean, is the law of optimality even like, is it even more universal than the law of assumption? Is it overarching? So it can be debated. The answer is yes and no, and I probably not you want to hear, but so why is it no? Because whatever you assume gets reflected in your 3D, and you've heard Neville talk about these things, right? Everything is possible, because everything is possible is something which is also discussed in quantum physics, because every reality, everything has a quantum signature associated with it. Now, as a science student, I was really when I first stumbled across this quantum physics, and how, like, if you are a science student, it's like quantum physics is really it's really wishy-washy kind of an area. Like, I mean, you read all these you read Newton's law, Einstein's law, and these are very, very objective, very mathematical, very precise. And when you go to quantum, it's like probability. It's like tossing a coin, right? It's like rolling a die. Everything is like, everything can happen. You're like, how is this science? It's like someone is making stuff up. It's very vague, and I mean, the discussion, it gets wishy-washy. And so there's this particular experiment called the Young's double slit experiment, right? So this experiment is something which is extremely fascinating, and I'm going to discuss it in a different video. But so the idea here is that when we say everything is possible, and everything exists, so everything exists out there as a waveform, right? So so right now, this reality, like all of your realities, you can think of them, they are stacked on top of the other. But when I say stacked, you're thinking in terms of 3D, like, right, like as a deck of cards. But it happens in the fourth dimension, so you can just imagine infinite realities being superimposed on top of another, but they don't interfere with one another. And the reason here is because they exist as waves. Those waves collapse to something 3D, which can be perceived as in terms of those five senses: smell, touch, voice, noise, sorry, and all of these things, taste, uh, and of course vision, right, light. So these are the five sensory experiences. But say, for example, everything, you could perceive everything simultaneously, your senses would get overwhelmed. You can't really, like, you wouldn't be able to process that. And a part of our 3D experience is about trivializing the 4D, right? So you are literally cutting the 4D into slices of 3D. So you can, when I say slice, you're probably talking about the 2D, right? Like, you take a bread and then you slice it as like small chunks. Now you can take this analogy and extend it upwards, right? You take something 4D and you slice it at 3D chunks. Now the reason you are experiencing them, you're essentially experiencing your reality as slices, right? 3D slices. And 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 the reason is just so that you can savor it, right? So if like, say for example, you just bought all the food, like, you just take all, you have a list of favorite items you like to try, you like to have a you have a list of favorite cuisines, right? And say you are trying to eat all of them in a span of an hour. So you are not necessarily getting happy, you're just getting overwhelmed, right? And a part of you wants to distribute that sensory experience over a prolonged period of time so that you can savor it. So that is how the I am uh, decided to trivialize its infinite experience as something finite and limited. It is exactly why everything you experience happens in a limited manner, right? So these hurdles, these challenges, and this instinct towards finding a new challenge is something which is ingrained in us, right? Like, for example, I love a challenge. Like, it doesn't matter what area it is, I love a challenge. But you want that challenge to be somewhere up, you want it to be optimum, you don't want something to be too difficult or too easy. So you're always like, so there's this saying, I guess, I don't know who said that, but it's like, if you climb the top of a mountain, you'll find another mountain to climb, right? So that is exactly the principle. It's like you're always trying to go somewhere, and it doesn't matter how successful you are, you're going to find another challenge and try to overcome that. So yeah, so like there are different. So for example, I in the year to 2019 in September, I went to the UK to pursue my masters, right? And so I had a lots of free time, and it was a different experience for me. So I started making music on my MacBook, and it was a very different experience. And when I first stumbled, so just a little bit, a background information. So I've been learning music since I was 3. So that's that. So music is like deeply ingrained in my personality, in my overall experience of life. So I mean, I have. So when I started producing music on my laptop, it was a bit of a challenge because the entire software was something which I hadn't experienced before. But then there was also these skills, right? Like I was accustomed to music, so it was a sweet spot. And because it was like slightly difficult but not too difficult, I was able to I was able to start producing music, and I also developed this side of myself, right? And the same thing is with this channel, right? I never in my entire life, sorry for that. So I never in my entire life uh, assumed that I could actually make videos or and talk to an audience. So that is that. So so that was a long discussion. I So coming to number 3, that is law of optimality greater than law of assumption. You can say that, yeah, in a certain sense it is, because you're still manifesting in 3D, right? You are still doing all these practices, you're still affirming, you are lying in your bed and doing everything, so you're interacting with the 3D, you can't escape it really, right? So you are trying to change the 3D from 3D, right? So it is not like you are not, yeah, you are stepping outside when you're meditating, but like you are still inside the 3D, you are affirming in 3D. So the law of optimality is applied to that. So for example, what I'm talking about, the resistance. So since the goal is to convincing yourself, if there are external triggers which kind of water down your conviction, right? So that is something which is a subject to the law of optimality as well. So what I'm trying to say is that if you are closing your eyes, meditating, and doing and practicing a really lot, and you're burning yourself down, like you're getting burnt out, so that is when you should dial it down. So yeah, that is your practices are being governed by the law of optimality. So in a sense, it's also yes, right? So it's a yes and no. It's debatable, and since everything is for the most part, that's why we are having such a long discussion at the end of the day. Because if things were so simple, then we just sort of will be solving the problem, right? And so that brings us to the end of the slide. And this video was slightly bit different from how my usual videos go, which are largely narrated and it follows a script. But yeah, So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, this lesson, and you're watching Spiritual Silvera. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and see you soon.